You're watching the free version of Mocha Essentials. Follow along with projects and footage with a premium download available at BorisFX.com. Welcome back to exercise 3, Introduction to Mocha's Planar Tracker. In this part of the exercise, we're going to be looking at the final track types, which is going to be shear and perspective, and what the difference is between those. Let's apply and open Mocha and get into it. And let's play back our clip. Now, when we just look at this, it looks, very much like just plain rotation that we've got going on here. But this movement that we're looking at is actually something a little bit different. And this is something that we will see commonly when working with organic objects. So that's, say, people or animals, clothing, that sort of stuff. The way that, natural objects or organic objects move in the real world. So I'm going to come in and let's go to the start of this, and I'll create in a new shape. I'm going to use my X-spline rectangle again and just come in here and just bring this up right about here. There we go. And I'm going to look at this motion type, skew. And if we're working in the classic mode, this will say shear. Shear and skew are the same type of motion. And to properly compare this, I'm going to turn skew off, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm just going to call this layer rotate, and I'm going to duplicate it. And to duplicate it, I just come down to the bottom and click on the shape that looks like a new piece of paper. And this makes a copy of what we had. So I'm going to call one rotate, and I'm going to call one skew. And we're going to put the skew one down at the bottom and turn off tracking and turn off visibility as well. So let's come back into our rotate and just turn on the surface as it is by default and turn on the grid as it is by default. And let's track that forwards. Okay, that looks like a nice consistent type of movement. That's great. Fine. Let's bring this back. We'll look at this in a bit more detail. I mean, we saw as it tracked through that it was tracking through nice and consistently. We'll analyze this in a little bit. So I'm going to now turn off the cog on rotate, turn off visibility on rotate, and bring it down to the bottom just by clicking and dragging. We're going to talk about layer order and why that's important in a slightly later exercise when we talk about track mats. So just go with me on this one. And I'm going to change the color of our outline just by clicking on this box here. So now we know what these first 4 buttons are doing. I'm not going to change any of our other parameters. I'm just going to leave everything as it is. All I'm going to do is make sure that skew is turned on our skew layer. Again, if you're working in classic mode, turn on shear. And I'm going to track this forwards. And if we play that back, that also looks very nice and steady and very solid. So what is the difference that we're getting by adding in that shear? Well, let's compare the two, shall we? I'm going to turn off my surface and my grid because I can only see the surface and grid on one layer. And let's turn off the cog on the skew just to get into the habit of doing that. And I'm going to turn on the visibility of the rotate. So now the skew and the rotate should be both visible when we play this back. And let's have a little look what's going on here. And we can see that pretty quickly these tracks have diverged. Let's come back and see when that happens. Okay, this is probably a good one here. Frame 1 second and 4 frames in. So if we have a look at what the rotate has done, it's trying to follow using just the translation, scale, and Z rotation, to just rotating around there. And that fits in pretty well, but that doesn't describe the movement that's happening with the towel here. Because what's happening here isn't just a rotation. It is a skewing motion. And what is skew doing? Well, take a look at the bottom line down here and the top line up here. So those lines are remaining parallel. So they're always going to be pointing in the same direction. These lines here are also remaining parallel. So they're going to, again, they're both moving in the same direction. And the skew movement is what's happening between those. So these lines, these two lines are staying parallel, these two lines are staying parallel, but they're moving in concert so that they can map in what's happening. That is a skew transformation or a shear transformation. So it's not just a straight rotation, it's doing more to fit that stuff in. And if we take a look at the distance between the bottom line we have here on the cloth and the bottom line we have here on our shape. So let's look at this and put all of our focus on this here. So I slowly move forward. The rotation loses that distance very quickly. The shear or the skew doesn't, it maintains that distance. Let's see how that works on a different clip. I'm going to apply Mocha Pro to this next clip as well. And as we play this back, we can see something that looks much more like how an arm would move. There we go. So we've got the bend at the elbow. This elbow, the cloth elbow rather than the real elbow, obviously. And let's see how we can track that in. So if I wanted to track all of this here, I couldn't just make one single shape that tracks the whole thing, because the movement between the lower area and the upper area is not coplanar. So I would want to make two separate shapes. And I can do that either with the rectangle tool that we've used, pretty much exclusively up till now, or I could also use just one of the other tools like the X-spline tool. So come in and I can just draw an X-spline up here. I think it should be okay. And I will call this one upper arm. And I'll call this one lower arm. I'm going to keep everything at default, including the skew. And let's just track these forwards. And it's interesting to note that we can track multiple shapes simultaneously. We don't have to do anything special. We just have to have the cogs selected and then hit the track button. And let's come back to our start frame and track that one backwards as well. Lovely. Let's just turn on our mats. We'll go mats, all mats, then view mats and mats there. Change these colors with the final button. So that's our fill color, just so we can see these a bit easier. And let's play that through. And let's take a look. And it's that same motion. It's the, we have the two sets of parallel lines giving us that shear. And up at the top, this looks pretty good. And down on the left-hand side, this also looks really good as well. Now, one thing to note, as this shape deforms, we're still getting a nice consistent result here. It's not deforming and shrinking in with that point there. And the reason for that is the resilience of the Mocha tracker. We've told it to give us the shear motion of what's happening in this whole area. And this is the most consistent result. Most of this area is moving in the way of the shape. It's like this area, this little bit here is not, because it's not completely coplanar. And what Mocha ends up doing is giving us this general movement that we're after. And this is the most important movement. So whether we're using this for, inserting something into this area here, or more likely in this case is we're using this as a way of helping us to create roto splines later on in the process. This is the type of motion that we actually want to capture and we actually want to use. Because if the tracker was being thrown off by lots of small changes, all of a sudden that stops being as useful. Okay, so that's our shear transformation or our skew transformation. And we're going to be using this a lot, mainly for organic objects. Let's come in and go to our last shot here. And let's apply Mocha to this one and see what we've got. And let's play this back and take a look. Okay, so now we can see we've got this, our playing card again, and it's rotating again, but it's not just rotating in Z, so it's not just sort of doing a little spin. We're also sort of rotating in 3D as well. So we're rotating in X, Y, and Z. And how do we track this when we're just looking at 2D? Well, we're going to do this using our perspective tracking, because our perspective tracking is going to be tracking in 4 points. So this is close to 4 corner point tracking that you're going to get with Mocha. Let's come in. I've got this. I think this is basically as clear as our shape is going to get, and we'll track in this. In fact, we'll give a little bit of space for the card name as well. So this is, relatively clear, definitely face on. And I'm going to call this one Skew. And I'm going to make, before I make a duplicate of it, let's set up the 4 corner points. And once this is finished, we're going to think back to the results we were getting with our initial movements on the cards when we were just doing translation and rotation. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Grid set up. I'm going to duplicate this one. And I'm going to call this one Perspective. I'm only going to track one at a time though. So I'm going to drag Perspective down to the bottom, turn off visibility and our processing cog, and I'll give it another color as well, even though it's invisible. Come back up to Skew and let's track this one through. And let's track it backwards as well. And that appears to have done, a pretty good job. All right, let's come back to our start point. Do the same as we did previously with the skew and rotation. I'm going to bring perspective up to the top now, turn on the processing and visibility on this, and change our track motion options so we're also tracking in perspective. And let's track that forwards. And track it backwards. And that also looks pretty solid. So, what's the difference between these two? Well, let's take a look at a random frame, 616 on this one. And I'm going to turn visibility on our skew now. And I'm just going to move between these two. So this is perspective and this is skew. This is perspective. This is skew. Check out the top left-hand corner. Perspective, skew. So what perspective is able to do is it's moving these 4 corner points independently. So these are mapping to this plane absolutely perfectly. What the skew is doing is it's trying to keep these lines, parallel, and these lines parallel as well. So there are certain movements that it's just not able to get properly. If I come to another random frame, we'll come here. So this is perspective. This is skew. Check out the bottom left and the bottom right. Perspective, absolutely perfect. Skew, just a little bit off. And that's because perspective works perfectly for this type of track. So wherever we've got a flat object, something like, this card, a number plate, a flat area of ground, and the object is moving and rotating in 3D space, perspective is going to be the one that you want to use. If we're getting in something a bit more organic and the area isn't rigid, like this card or a number plate or the ground, so it's something that could be moving like like someone's arm or someone's clothing, something like that, then skew is going to be preferred in that instance. And this is something that you're going to sort of start to feel out as well as you get more used to working with different types of tracks or different types of shots. You'll understand what track motion type is going to work best for a particular task. And this is something that will come with experience. And in the spirit of that, let's come out of here. Let's come back into our main composition here. And we're going to do a little quick quiz. I'm going to play back some shots and you're going to shout at the screen what type of tracking is going to be best for this. Is it going to be translation, translation and scale, translation, scale and rotation, translation, scale, rotation, shear or skew, or the full Monty, translation, scale, rotation, shear and perspective? So let's take a look. First one is a train. Moving past there. We're just putting something on top. It's moving from left to right. The perfect type of tracking for this is translation. Yes, that's right. Okay, our second shot, we have again a drone shot moving upwards. What sort of movement is this going to be? Probably just to track in this movement or track in this motion nice and easily. Yep, translation and scale. So we want to add in scale here. Our third shot, we're just putting in a little area here. Oh, hang on, not that one. Our third shot, well, we've got translations, we've got position changes up and down. We've got scale changes as the camera moves forward. And we also have a wobbly freehand camera also rotating around as well. So this shot was also handled with translation, scale, and rotation. Moving on to the next shot. We have a little bit of moving around on an organic object. So organic objects, we're going to add in skew there. And finally, we're tracking on a flat, solid object that isn't going to change. It's the ground. And on this one, we're going to use perspective as well. So translation only for moving left and right, up and down. Scale when something's moving bigger and smaller. Rotation when it's also rotating on the Z axis. So it's just sort of doing a 2D rotate. Shear or skew when we're trying to do organic objects. So often for driving rotoscoping. So that's stuff that could bulge or move a little bit. And when we're tracking in flat objects that are moving and rotating in 3D space, we also want to add in a bit of perspective. And that's the end of exercise 3. And I hope that's been useful for you to start to understand what the different types of motion are that we can track in using Mocha's planar tracker. Obviously, interwoven into that, we've started to build up a little bit of confidence with working with the Mocha UI and understand what some of the viewer controls are doing as well. In the next exercise, we're going to be continuing on that path, and we're going to be looking at some different techniques for tracking in certain types of footage. So footage where we have reflections or where we have objects crossing each other or when objects move off screen. And we're going to be figuring out some useful tracking ideas that we can use to tackle those shots. So join me in exercise 4, where we look at more tracking techniques. You've been watching the free version of Mocha Essentials. To download all videos, projects and footage, purchase the premium version available at BorisFX.com.